She stood at the checkout counter with trembling hands, counting her last $3.18 for baby formula, while behind her a man in an expensive suit watched silently, and what happened next would change both their lives forever. Because sometimes the universe puts two strangers together at exactly the right moment, when one needs help desperately and the other needs to remember what truly matters in life. And this is that story of Mary Mitchell, a single mother fighting against all odds, and Joseph Harrison, a CEO who had forgotten the value of a single dollar until he saw a woman crying over coins that represented her baby's only meal. Main story. Mary Mitchell woke up that Tuesday morning to the sound of her baby Janice crying in the small bedroom of their one-room apartment, and as she opened her eyes to the cracked ceiling above her bed, she felt the familiar weight of exhaustion settle into her bones because she had worked a double shift at the diner the night before and had only managed to get 3 hours of sleep before Janice started crying again. And Mary knew without even checking that her daughter was hungry and sick and needed the special formula that the doctor had prescribed. But Mary also knew that she only had a few dollars left to her name, and payday was still 5 days away. She dragged herself out of bed and walked over to the small crib where Janice lay crying with her tiny fists clenched and her face red from the effort of expressing her discomfort, and Mary picked up her daughter and held her close, feeling the warmth of the small body against her chest and whispering soft words of comfort, even though she knew that words could not fill an empty stomach or cure whatever illness was making her baby so miserable for the past 2 weeks. Mary had been to the hospital 3 times in the last month because Janice kept getting sick with stomach problems and rashes, and the doctors had run tests and finally determined that regular formula was not agreeing with her digestive system, and they recommended a special hypoallergenic formula that cost almost 3 times as much as the regular kind, and Mary had been trying to make it work by stretching every dollar and skipping her own meals and picking up extra shifts whenever she could, but it was never enough, and she was falling further behind with each passing day. As she prepared a small amount of the remaining formula in a bottle, Mary looked around her tiny apartment and felt a wave of despair wash over her, because the rent was already 2 weeks late, and the landlord had started leaving threatening notes under her door, and the electricity bill was overdue, and she had received a disconnection warning, and her car had broken down last week, and she had no money to fix it, so she had been taking the bus to work, which added an extra hour to her commute each way, and left her even less time to sleep or take care of herself. Mary fed Janice the bottle and watched as her daughter drank hungrily, and she realized with growing panic that this was the last of the formula, and she would need to buy more today. But when she checked her wallet, she found only 3 $1 bills, and when she searched through her purse and coat pockets and the cup on her kitchen counter where she kept loose change, she managed to scrape together 18 cents in pennies and nickels and dimes, and that was all the money she had in the world, until her next paycheck. She sat down on the edge of her bed with Janice in her arms and felt tears starting to form in her eyes, because she did not know how she was going to make it through the next 5 days, and she wondered how she had ended up in this situation when just 2 years ago she had been planning a wedding and dreaming of a happy family and a comfortable life. But then everything had fallen apart when her fiancé David had left her when she was 6 months pregnant, saying he was not ready to be a father, and Mary had been forced to face motherhood alone, without any family support, because her parents had died in a car accident when she was in college, and she had no siblings, and David's family had sided with him and wanted nothing to do with her or the baby. Mary had tried so hard to make things work, and she had managed to keep her job as a waitress at the diner throughout her pregnancy, and had gone back to work just 3 weeks after giving birth because she could not afford to take any more time off, and she had found a neighbor who agreed to watch Janice during her shifts in exchange for a small payment, and Mary had been juggling work and motherhood and endless worry about money ever since. And now, with Janice's health problems and the special expensive formula and all the bills piling up, she felt like she was drowning, and there was no one to throw her a lifeline. But Mary Mitchell was not the kind of person who gave up easily, and she wiped away her tears and told herself that she would figure it out somehow, because she always did. And she got dressed in her worn jeans and faded jacket, and wrapped Janice in a blanket and put her in the stroller and headed out to the store because her baby needed formula, and Mary would find a way to get it, even if she had to beg or borrow or go without food herself for the next few days. The nearest store that sold the special formula was a pharmacy about 6 blocks away, and Mary pushed the stroller along the cracked sidewalks of her neighborhood, past boarded-up buildings and chain-link fences and groups of people standing on corners, and she kept her head down and walked quickly, because she had learned that it was safer not to make eye contact or draw attention to herself in this part of town. And after about 20 minutes, she arrived at the pharmacy and pushed through the glass doors into the brightly lit interior. The store was quiet that morning with only a few other customers browsing the aisles, and Mary made her way directly to the baby section where the formula was kept, and she found the special hypoallergenic brand that the doctor had recommended and picked up a canister and turned it over to check the price. And her heart sank when she saw that it cost $14.99, because she had been hoping that maybe it would be on sale, or that she had remembered the price wrong. But no, it was still the same impossibly expensive amount that she could not afford. Mary stood there in the aisle holding the canister and trying to calculate whether there was any possible way she could make this work. And she thought about asking the pharmacist if they had a smaller size or a generic version. But she already knew from previous visits that this was the only option for this particular type of formula. And she thought about putting it back and going to a different store to see if it was cheaper somewhere else. But she also knew that she had already checked every pharmacy and grocery store within walking distance, and they all charged the same price. She felt Janice starting to fuss in the stroller, and she knew that her daughter would be hungry again soon, and she made a decision that she would take the formula to the checkout counter and explain her situation and ask if there was any way they could help her, and maybe they would let her pay part of it now and the rest later. Or maybe there was some kind of assistance program she did not know about. And even though she felt embarrassed and ashamed to have to ask for help, she swallowed her pride and pushed the stroller toward the front of the store, with the canister of formula in her hand. At the checkout counter, there was a young woman with a name tag that said Rebecca, and Mary approached her and set the formula down on the counter and said hello in a quiet voice. And Rebecca scanned the item and said that will be $14.99. And Mary took a deep breath and said, I only have $3.18 right now, and I know that is not enough, but my baby needs this formula. And she has been sick, and the doctor said, this is the only kind that will work for her. And I was wondering if there was any way I could pay the rest later, or if you have a payment plan or anything like that. Rebecca looked at Mary with a sympathetic expression and said, I am sorry, but we do not have any payment plans, and I cannot let you take the formula without paying for it in full. And Mary felt her face getting hot with embarrassment, and she said, I understand. But is there anyone I could talk to or any program that might be able to help? Because I am a single mother, and I am really struggling right now, and my baby is sick, and I do not know what else to do. Rebecca said, let me call the manager and see if there is anything we can do. And she picked up the phone and made a call. And after a few moments, a middle-aged man in a shirt and tie came out from the back office and walked over to the counter. And Rebecca explained the situation to him, and he looked at Mary with a stern expression and said, I am sorry, miss, but we are a business, and we cannot just give away products for free. And if we made exceptions for everyone who came in here with a hard luck story, we would be out of business in a week. Mary felt tears starting to well up in her eyes again, and she said, I am not asking for it for free. I am asking if there is any way I can pay for it over time, or if you know of any resources that might be able to help me. And the manager shook his head and said, you might want to try calling social services or a food bank, but there is nothing we can do for you here. And I am going to have to ask you to either pay for the item or leave the store. Mary stood there feeling humiliated and desperate, and she looked down at Janice in the stroller and thought about her hungry, sick baby. And she felt like the worst mother in the world for not being able to provide such a basic necessity. And she was about to turn and walk out of the store when a deep voice behind her said, Excuse me? I will pay for the formula. Mary turned around and saw a tall man in his 50s wearing an expensive-looking suit and tie, standing behind her in line. And he had kind eyes and a gentle expression, and he was holding a basket with a few items in it, and he stepped forward and said to the manager, "Please add her formula to my purchase." And the manager looked surprised and said, "Are you sure, sir?" And the man nodded and said, "Yes, I am sure." Mary was so shocked that she could not speak for a moment, and then she said, "Oh no, sir. You do not have to do that. I could not possibly accept." And the man smiled and said, "Please let me help it. Is no trouble at all, and every parent deserves to be able to feed their child." And Mary felt tears streaming down her face now, and she said, "Thank you so much. You have no idea what this means to me." And the man said, "I think I have some idea." And he handed his credit card to Rebecca, who processed the transaction and bagged up the formula along with the man's other items. Mary took the bag with trembling hands and said, "How can I ever repay you?" And the man said, "You do not need to repay me. Just take care of your daughter and pay it forward someday when you are able to help someone else." And Mary nodded and said, "I will. I promise. And thank you again." And she pushed the stroller toward the exit, still crying, and overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness of this stranger, who had just saved her from an impossible situation. But before she could leave the store, the man called out, "Wait." And Mary turned around, and he walked over to her and said, "I am sorry. I do not mean to pry. But are you doing okay?" And Mary wiped her eyes and said, "I am managing." And the man said, "I can see that you are going through a difficult time, and I would like to help more if you would let me." And Mary said, "You have already done so much, and I could not ask for anything more." And the man said, "You are not asking, I am offering." He reached into his wallet and pulled out several bills and handed them to Mary, and said, "Please take this and use it for whatever you need, whether it is more formula or groceries or to pay a bill." And Mary looked down at the money in her hand and saw that it was $200, and she gasped and said, "This is too much. I cannot take this from you." And the man said, "Yes, you can, and you will, because I have been blessed with more than I need, and it would make me very happy to know that I helped make your life a little easier." Mary was crying so hard now that she could barely see, and she said, "Who are you? And why are you being so kind to me?" And the man said, "My name is Joseph Harrison, and I am being kind to you because someone was kind to me once when I needed it, and because I see something in you that reminds me of my own mother, who raised me alone and worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table, and I know how hard you are working and how much you love your daughter, and you deserve help and support." Mary introduced herself and told Joseph about her situation, and how she had been struggling since Janice was born, and how her fiancé had left, and how she had no family, and how she was barely making ends meet. And Joseph listened with genuine concern and asked questions about her work and her living situation, and her plans for the future, and Mary found herself opening up to this stranger, in a way she had not opened up to anyone in a long time, because there was something about him that made her feel safe and understood. After they had talked for a few minutes, Joseph said, "I have an idea, and I would like to propose something to you, but I want you to know that there are no strings attached, and you are free to say no if you are not comfortable with it." And Mary said, "Okay." And Joseph said, "I own a company, and we are always looking for good people to join our team, and I would like to offer you a job in our customer service department, and it would pay significantly more than what you are making at the diner, and it would come with benefits including health insurance and paid time off." And Mary stared at him in disbelief and said, "Are you serious?" And Joseph said, "Yes, I am completely serious." Mary said, "But you do not even know me, and you do not know if I am qualified." And Joseph said, "I know enough, and I can tell that you are hardworking and responsible and dedicated, and those are the qualities that matter most, and we can train you on the specific skills you need." And Mary felt like she was dreaming, because this could not be real, and she said, "I do not know what to say." And Joseph said, "Say yes." And Mary laughed through her tears and said, "Yes, thank you. Yes, I would love to accept your offer." Joseph smiled and pulled out a business card from his wallet and handed it to Mary and said, "Call this number tomorrow morning and ask for Jennifer in Human Resources, and tell her that I sent you, and she will set up an interview and get you started on the hiring process." And Mary looked at the card and saw that it said Joseph Harrison, Chief Executive Officer, and underneath was the name of a company that she recognized as one of the largest employers in the city. And she looked up at Joseph with wide eyes and said, "You are the CEO." And Joseph nodded and said yes. But that does not matter. Right now, what matters is that you and your daughter get the help you need. Mary did not know how to express the gratitude she felt in that moment, because words seemed inadequate to describe the overwhelming sense of relief and hope that was flooding through her body. And she just kept saying thank you over and over again, and Joseph said, "You are very welcome." And then he looked down at Janice, who had fallen asleep in the stroller, and he said, "She is beautiful." And Mary said, "Thank you. She is my whole world." And Joseph said, "I can see that. And she is very lucky to have a mother who loves her so much and fights so hard for her." Before they parted ways, Joseph asked Mary if she needed a ride home, and Mary said, "No, thank you. I can take the bus." And Joseph said, "Are you sure? Because my car is right outside, and it would be no trouble." And Mary hesitated because she did not want to impose any further. But Joseph said, "Please let me drive you home. You have been through enough today, and you should not have to struggle with a stroller on the bus." And Mary finally agreed and said, "Okay, thank you. That would be very helpful." Joseph led Mary out of the pharmacy to where a sleek black car was parked at the curb, and he helped her fold up the stroller and put it in the trunk, and then opened the back door, so she could settle Janice in her car seat, and then Mary got in the front passenger seat, and Joseph got behind the wheel and asked for her address, and Mary gave it to him even though she felt a little embarrassed about him seeing where she lived. But Joseph did not seem to judge, and he just entered the address into his GPS and started driving. During the ride, Joseph told Mary a little bit about his own background and how he had grown up poor in a rough neighborhood, not unlike the one where Mary lived now, and how his mother had worked multiple jobs to support him and his two sisters after their father left, and how there had been many times when they did not have enough food or could not pay the bills, and how Joseph had been determined to create a better life for himself and his family, and had worked his way through college and business school and eventually started his own company. He said that his mother had passed away 10 years ago, but that he thought about her every day and tried to honor her memory by helping others who were in situations similar to what his family had faced. And he said that when he saw Mary in the pharmacy counting her coins and trying so hard to provide for her sick baby, it reminded him of his mother and all the sacrifices she had made, and he knew he had to help, because that is what his mother would have wanted him to do. Mary listened to Joseph's story with tears in her eyes, because she realized that this man understood her struggle in a way that very few people could, and she said, "Your mother must have been an amazing woman." And Joseph said she was. "And you remind me of her, because you have that same strength and determination and love for your child that she had." And Mary said, "I do not feel very strong right now." And Joseph said, "But you are, because strength is not about never struggling or never feeling overwhelmed. It is about keeping going, even when things are impossibly hard. And that is what you are doing." When they arrived at Mary's apartment building, Joseph parked the car and helped her get the stroller out of the trunk and carry it up the steps to her front door. And Mary invited him in for a cup of coffee or tea as a small gesture of thanks. But Joseph declined politely and said he needed to get to a meeting, but that he looked forward to seeing her at the office soon. And Mary said, "I will call tomorrow morning first thing." And Joseph said good, and he shook her hand and said, "Take care of yourself and that beautiful baby." And Mary said, "I will, and thank you again for everything you have done for me today." As Joseph walked back to his car, Mary stood in the doorway of her apartment holding Janice and watching him leave, and she felt like she had just experienced a miracle, because how else could she explain what had just happened? And she thought about all the times over the past 2 years when she had felt completely alone and forgotten, and like no one in the world cared whether she lived or died. And now this stranger had appeared out of nowhere and shown her such incredible kindness and generosity, and given her hope for the first time in so long. That night, after she had fed Janice and put her to bed, Mary sat at her small kitchen table and looked at Joseph's business card and the $200 he had given her, and she still could not quite believe that it was real, and she thought about calling the number on the card. Right then, just to make sure it was legitimate. But she decided to wait until morning, as he had instructed, and instead she used some of the money to order a pizza for dinner, because she had not had a real meal in days, and she allowed herself to feel just a little bit of joy and relief. The next morning, Mary woke up early and called the number on Joseph's business card, and a pleasant-sounding woman answered and said, "Good morning, Harrison Industries. How may I help you?" And Mary said, "Hello. My name is Mary Mitchell, and Joseph Harrison told me to call and ask for Jennifer in Human Resources." And the woman said, "Oh yes. Mr. Harrison left a note about you. Please hold, and I will transfer you." A moment later, another woman came on the line and said, "Hello. This is Jennifer," and Mary explained who she was, and that Joseph had offered her a job, and Jennifer said, "Yes. We have been expecting your call. And Mr. Harrison has asked me to expedite your application process and get you started as soon as possible. So, when can you come in for an interview?" And Mary said, "I can come in today, if that works." And Jennifer said, "Perfect. How about 2 o'clock this afternoon?" And Mary agreed, and Jennifer gave her the address and some basic instructions about where to park and what to bring. Mary spent the rest of the morning getting ready for the interview and trying to figure out what to wear, since she did not own any professional clothes. And finally, she settled on her nicest pair of jeans and a simple blouse, and she asked her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, if she could watch Janice for a few hours, and Mrs. Chen agreed, and Mary took the bus to the Harrison Industries office building, which was in the business district downtown, and was a gleaming glass tower that looked like something out of a movie. She felt intimidated as she walked through the lobby with its marble floors and expensive artwork and well-dressed people hurrying back and forth, but she took a deep breath and reminded herself that Joseph had invited her here, and that she had just as much right to be here as anyone else, and she went to the reception desk and told them she had an appointment with Jennifer in HR, and the receptionist directed her to the 15th floor. Jennifer turned out to be a kind woman in her 40s who greeted Mary warmly and conducted a brief interview asking about her work history and her skills and her goals, and Mary answered as honestly as she could and explained that she did not have much formal education or office experience, but that she was a hard worker and a quick learner, and that she was desperate for an opportunity to provide a better life for her daughter. And Jennifer smiled and said, "That is exactly the kind of attitude we are looking for." At the end of the interview, Jennifer said, "I am happy to offer you a position as a customer service representative starting at $18 an hour with full benefits. And you can start next Monday if that works for you." And Mary felt like she might faint, because $18 an hour was more than double what she was making at the diner. And with benefits, it meant she could finally take Janice to the doctor without worrying about the cost. And she said, "Yes, absolutely, I accept. Thank you so much." And Jennifer said, "Wonderful, welcome to the team." Mary left the Harrison Industries building, feeling like she was walking on air, and she could not wait to tell Joseph how grateful she was and to start her new job and begin building a better life for herself and Janice. And as she rode the bus home, she thought about how one small act of kindness from a stranger had changed everything, and she made a promise to herself that someday, when she was in a position to help someone else, she would do so without hesitation, because she now understood the incredible impact that generosity could have on a person's life. Over the next few weeks, Mary started her new job and discovered that she was actually quite good at customer service, and her colleagues were friendly and supportive, and the work environment was completely different from the chaotic, stressful atmosphere of the diner, and for the first time in years, she felt like she had some stability and security in her life, and Janice's health began to improve now that Mary could afford the special formula and regular doctor visits, and Mary was able to catch up on her overdue bills and even start saving a little bit of money. Joseph checked in on Mary periodically, sending her emails through Jennifer to see how she was settling in and whether she needed anything. and Mary always responded with gratitude and updates on how well things were going. And after about a month, Joseph invited Mary to have lunch with him in the executive dining room, and Mary was nervous but excited, and she dressed in one of the professional outfits she had been able to buy with her new salary and met him at the appointed time. During lunch, Joseph asked Mary about her experience at the company and whether she was happy with her decision to join the team, and Mary said she could not be happier and that the job had literally saved her life. And Joseph smiled and said, "I am so glad to hear that, and I want you to know that you earned this position through your own merit and hard work, and I may have opened the door, but you are the one who walked through it and made the most of the opportunity." Mary said, "I will never forget what you did for me that day in the pharmacy." And Joseph said, "And I will never forget the reminder you gave me about what really matters in life, because I had been so caught up in running my company and making deals and accumulating wealth that I had lost sight of the fact that the most important thing we can do is help each other. And your situation reminded me of my mother and all the people who are struggling every day just to survive, and it inspired me to do more." Joseph went on to tell Mary that her story had motivated him to start a charitable foundation through Harrison Industries that would provide assistance to single parents and families in need. And he asked if Mary would be willing to serve on the advisory board and share her perspective and help guide the foundation's work. And Mary was honored and said yes. "Of course, I would love to help in any way I can." Over the following months and years, Mary continued to thrive at Harrison Industries, and she was promoted several times and eventually became a manager in the customer service department. And she used her position to advocate for other employees who were facing hardships and to create policies that supported working parents, and she became close friends with Joseph, who became like a father figure to her, and a grandfather figure to Janice. Joseph attended Janice's birthday parties and school events, and was there to celebrate Mary's accomplishments and offer advice and support when she faced challenges. And Mary often reflected on how different her life might have been if Joseph had not been standing behind her in line at that pharmacy on that desperate Tuesday morning when she had been down to her last $3.18. The foundation that Joseph started in Mary's honor went on to help thousands of families, providing financial assistance, childcare support, job training, and other resources to single parents and low-income families throughout the city. And Mary became one of the foundation's most passionate advocates, speaking at fundraising events and sharing her story to inspire others, and to remind people that one act of kindness can truly change a life. Mary never forgot where she came from, and she made a point of giving back to her community, volunteering at food banks and homeless shelters, and mentoring other single mothers who were struggling, just as she had struggled. And whenever she met someone who was facing impossible odds, she thought about Joseph and the way he had seen her not as a charity case, but as a person with dignity and potential. And she tried to treat others with that same respect and compassion. Janice grew up, healthy and happy, knowing that she was loved and that her mother had fought through incredible hardships to give her a good life. And Mary made sure to teach her daughter about gratitude and generosity and the importance of helping others. And as Janice got older, Mary told her the story of the day in the pharmacy when a kind stranger had changed their lives forever. And Janice grew up with a deep sense of empathy and a commitment to making the world a better place. Years later, when Joseph was preparing to retire, he called Mary into his office and told her that he wanted her to take over as the executive director of the foundation. And Mary was overwhelmed and said, "I do not know if I am qualified for such an important position." And Joseph said, "You are more than qualified because you understand what it means to struggle and to need help and to receive kindness, and that understanding is more valuable than any degree or credential." Mary accepted the position, and under her leadership, the foundation expanded its reach and helped even more families. And she never lost sight of the mission that had brought the foundation into existence, which was to ensure that no parent would ever have to stand at a checkout counter, counting coins, and worrying about how to feed their child, and that every person would have access to the support and resources they needed to build a better life. The story of Mary Mitchell and Joseph Harrison became well known in their city, and eventually spread beyond as a powerful example of human compassion and the difference that one person can make in another person's life. And whenever people asked Joseph why he had decided to help Mary that day in the pharmacy, he always gave the same answer, which was that he had seen his mother in her, and he had remembered all the times when his family had needed help, and he had simply done what he wished someone had done for his mother. And whenever people asked Mary how she had managed to overcome such incredible obstacles and build such a successful life, she always credited Joseph and said that his kindness had given her hope when she had none, and had shown her that she was worthy of help and support and love, and that belief in herself had enabled her to keep fighting and keep working and keep dreaming of a better future for herself and her daughter. The truth was that both Mary and Joseph had changed each other's lives that day in the pharmacy, because Mary had reminded Joseph of what truly mattered and had inspired him to use his wealth and influence to make a real difference in people's lives. And Joseph had given Mary the gift of hope and opportunity and belief in herself. And together they had created something beautiful and lasting that would impact thousands of lives for generations to come. In the end, the story of Mary Mitchell and Joseph Harrison is a reminder that we all have the power to change someone's life through small acts of kindness, and that the struggles we face can become the foundation for something meaningful, and that human connection and compassion are the most valuable things we can offer one another, and that sometimes the universe puts two people together at exactly the right moment, when one needs help and the other needs to remember what it means to be human. And when that happens, magic can occur, and lives can be transformed in ways that neither person could have ever imagined. And so Mary continued to lead the foundation with passion and dedication, always remembering the desperate young mother she had once been counting coins at a pharmacy counter, and always grateful for the stranger who had seen her humanity and had chosen to help. And Joseph continued to support the foundation and to be a presence in Mary and Janice's lives. And he often said that helping Mary that day was the best business decision he had ever made, because it had reconnected him with his purpose and had given his life meaning beyond profit margins and quarterly reports. The message that Mary and Joseph shared through their story and through the work of the foundation was simple but profound, which was that every person deserves dignity and support, and that we all have a responsibility to help each other, and that kindness is never wasted, and that even when life seems impossibly difficult, there is always hope, and that sometimes that hope comes in the form of a stranger who sees you and understands you and chooses to lift you up, and that when we help others, we are really helping ourselves, because we are all connected, and we all benefit when everyone has the opportunity to thrive and live with dignity. And Security Mary Mitchell never forgot the feeling of standing at that checkout counter with only $3.18, and the shame and fear and desperation she had felt in that moment, and she used that memory to fuel her work and to ensure that no one else would have to experience that same helplessness. And whenever she met with a family who was receiving help from the foundation, she made sure they knew that they were not alone, and that they were worthy of support, and that better days were ahead. And she always told them about the stranger who had helped her when she needed it most, and encouraged them to pay it forward when they were able. And Joseph Harrison never forgot the young mother with tears in her eyes, and a sick baby in a stroller, who had reminded him of his own mother, and of all the people who struggle every day, just to survive. And he made sure that the foundation remained well-funded and well-run, and he took personal interest in the families. It served often meeting with them and hearing their stories and offering encouragement and support, and he always said that Mary had taught him more about business and life and what matters than any mentor or book or experience ever had, because she had shown him that true success is measured not in dollars, but in lives changed and people helped and hope restored. Together, Mary Mitchell and Joseph Harrison created a legacy of compassion and generosity that would outlive them both, and that would continue to impact families for decades to come. And their story became a testament to the power of human kindness and the incredible things that can happen when we choose to see each other's humanity and to respond with empathy and support. And as Mary often said in her speeches and interviews, the world would be a much better place if we all remembered that we are never more than one bad day away from needing help ourselves, and that the person standing behind us in line might be the angel we need, or might be the person who needs us to be their angel. And either way, we should always choose kindness, because that choice can change everything.